Bernie Sanders is having a town hall right now in Henderson, Nevada. I'm going to go to that, and we're going to cover that town hall live. I keep saying we as if there's multiple people there. It's just me, and hopefully you join me for it. Welcome to the Soapbox. So Bernie Sanders in the back is in Henderson, Nevada. He's talking to seniors, geriatrics. Now you can imagine why he's, and I don't mean that in a negative way by any stretch. I use it almost in a specific technical sense. In the word, for whatever reason, sounds funny to me. But he's talking to elderly about issues pertaining to seniors, and this is going to be a town hall, meaning it's going to be opening for question. So let's take a listen to Sanders, and let's go from here.
All Americans, don't divide us up. So we have got to work as hard as we possibly can in Nevada and Vermont and all over this country to make certain that Donald Trump is not reelected. Let me just say this also. I want to talk a little bit about what kind of makes my campaign a bit different than other campaigns. I was here in Nevada, not here, but I was 4 years ago running all over your state, talking to people. And 4 years ago, the ideas that I introduced into the political debate at that point were seen by the establishment media, by the establishment political class as radical and extreme ideas. Some of you may remember that. All right, people said, nobody, Bernie's a nice guy or he's not a nice guy, but his ideas don't make sense to anybody. Now, 4 years ago, I want you to remember the ideas that I talked about, which were seen to be crazy and radical. I said that if you work 40 hours a week, you should not live in poverty. We should raise the minimum wage to a living wage, $15 an hour. Remember that? Well,
it's hard to get across how much the Overton window has shifted in the time frame that just we've been alive. Oftentimes we like to think that, not we like to think, but oftentimes this notion that things are the way they are and they would always be that way. In the last 4 years, so in the last time, let's say the last election, when Obama was in office, you couldn't even bring up this notion of a public option off the table. At this point, we're talking about Medicare for all. This notion of expanding Social Security off the table. And that, at that point, Obama was talking about cutting it. There's been a shift in the Overton window. I just want to back up what Sanders is saying here. He's absolutely right. He can't oversell this part.
This is America. Years ago, I said that, maybe 50, 60 years ago, if you graduated high school, you can go out and make it into the middle class. You didn't need a higher education. But what I said 4 years ago is that the world and the economy and education and technology have all changed. And that for the young people of this country today, if they're going to make it into the middle class, if they're going to get a decent job in a competitive global economy, they need, regardless of their income, a higher education or technical training. And that's why I proposed the idea of making public colleges and universities tuition-free. And substantially reducing student debt. Okay? 4 years ago, that was a radical idea, not so radical anymore. 4 years ago, you had folks out there, Republicans, and I have to tell you, to be honest, some Democrats, talking about cutting Social Security. Now, I want you all to know, which I suspect you already do, that when you see somebody on television telling you, we need entitlement reform, you all know what they're talking about. Okay. They're talking about cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And a number of years ago, I helped form a caucus in the United States Senate called the Defending Social Security Caucus, all right? Because I know and you know that in Nevada and in Vermont and all over this country, there are people 80, 85, 90 years of age who are trying to survive on $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 a year Social Security. And my God, I have no idea in the world how anybody at 85 or 90 can survive on $12,000, $13,000, or $14,000. But there are millions of folks who are trying to do that. So no, I helped lead the fight in the United States Senate to say very clearly, no, we are not going to cut Social Security. We're going to expand Social Security benefits for those who need it. And we do that by lifting the cap on taxable income. All right? So right now you got somebody who's making $10 million a year, somebody who's making $100,000 or $160,000 a year. They're both paying the same amount into Social Security because there's a cap. You can't tax income above a certain level. Okay, we're going to lift that cap starting at $250,000. Small number of people will pay the same percentage of their income in taxes as somebody making $80,000 a year. And when you do that, you can raise benefits and extend the life of Social Security for another 50 years.
I love this. Isn't it awesome? He's essentially sitting here explaining policy to these guys and explaining, look, these guys are lying to you about this notion that Social Security doesn't have enough money, or we don't have enough money to cover Social Security. I love it. Let's let him do it. And keep in mind, it was Biden who was out there talking about cutting Social Security.
Behavior
Just saying.
Of the pharmaceutical industry in this country. Last year, the 10 major drug companies in America, hold your hats here, 10 major drug companies in America made $69 billion in profit. 10 companies, $69 billion in profit. And you know how they managed to make so much money? Because they are charging you by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. Do you all know that? All right, I want to tell you a story. Way back when I was representing Vermont in the U.S. House, back in 1999, I think, I took a busload of women from northern Vermont, from the St. Albans area, Franklin County, who were dealing with breast cancer. These were mostly working class women dealing with breast cancer. And we took about an hour and a half trip up to Montreal, Canada. You know why we went to Montreal, Canada? It wasn't for a sightseeing tour. Why did we go? All right, this is what happened. And then we had arranged all of this stuff beforehand. And I'll never forget this. One of these things, that stays in your mind. We went into this pharmacy in Montreal, and these were women, working class women who were struggling with breast cancer. No easy thing to deal with. Walked into the pharmacy, and a widely prescribed breast cancer drug called tamoxifen, okay? They went in there, they purchased that drug, same bottle, same damn thing, for 1/10 of the price they were paying in Vermont. 1/10 of the price, okay? Now, out of that trip, I was the first member of Congress to do something like that. Other members did it, senators did it. And today, there are millions of Americans who, unfortunately, are having to buy their medicine online or even visiting other countries to buy the medicine they need. In the United States of America, we should not be forced to pay the highest prices in the world. We should not be in a situation, listen to this if you can believe it. Today, 1 out of 5 Americans who walks into a doctor's office and gets a prescription for their illness cannot afford to fill that prescription. Today in America, and many of you may have had this experience, people walk into the pharmacy and the price of your medicine is doubled. And you say, well, why is it doubled? And the answer is they can double it, they can triple it, they can do anything they want because there is no legislation to control them. And the reason for that deals with the broader issue of a corrupt political system in which big money interests
why wouldn't they do that?
What goes on in
I mean, don't we have to engage that very basic point? Why wouldn't they do that? You have a drug company that has a product in the capitalistic system that people need. And in knowing people need that product, he increases the prices of the product that people need. What are you going to do? Go without your cancer medication? What are you going to do? Go without your insulin medication? You're not going to go without it. Sanders is making a point here about, look, you have a capitalistic system. You have a corrupt political system. Here's the key point. It's not corruption per se. All of these people are acting in the way that you could expect them to act. You have one person who's in political space who needs to get elected and needs money to get elected. You have another person who's in an economic space who wants benefits from the political space. In which case, the money that he gets, he puts a portion of that into the political space that comes back around that allows him to get some level of benefits. Of course he's going to increase the price. It allows him to maximize his profit.
Which is so Byzantine, ain't nobody understands it. Every hospital pays a different price. Medicaid pays a different price than Medicare. Medicare pays a different price than the VA. In fact, the VA, Veterans Administration, has for years negotiated prices with the drug companies. That is why their prices are the lowest in the country. And that's what we have to do with Medicare. Second area that we can make some progress is I am not a great believer in unfettered free trade. I should tell you that because I think it has hurt working people a whole lot. But if we are importing products from all over the world, do not tell me that we cannot safely import low-cost prescription drugs made by the same exact manufacturer from Canada or the UK or France. Of course we can. Distributors and pharmacists can do that, and they can resell those products at a substantially lower price. The third area, which is probably the simplest, and kind of what Canada does right now, is to, and we've introduced legislation to do this, which simply looks at what other countries around the world are paying. That's all. And we determine and we tell the drug companies, this is what you will receive. And if we do that, and I will do that as President of the United States, we will lower the cost of prescription drugs in this country by half. By half. Cut it in half. Now, you may think that that is a radical idea. It is not a radical idea because that's what people all over the world are already paying. So that's what we're going to do. And
I was injured abroad. He's right. We don't pay. It's just as a short aside to this. When I was traveling, there's certain medication that I need for pain management that doesn't necessarily work. Regular pain meds doesn't work. It has to do with nerve pain. This was something that has taken place going back to when I was like 19. And one of the limits or constraints when I travel is I need that med. It's like it becomes that trip ends if the pain isn't under control in this regard. The medications that I needed in the United States, without insurance, you're paying an arm and a leg for. When you're traveling abroad, insurance is not necessary because you're paying less abroad without insurance than you're paying in the United States with insurance. What he's saying here is not wrong. We're getting hosed. We are getting hosed.
Your car breaks down and you need a $500 repair. Well, you know what? If you don't have that $500, you can't get to work. And if you can't get to work, what happens? You get fired. If you get fired, you can't take care of your kids. There are people all over this country today who are sick. You know, they're feeling ill. They feel ill week after week, month after month. They're afraid to go to the doctor. You know why? Because they're going to find out that they have a terrible illness. They're going to have to go to the hospital, and they cannot afford to pay a $50,000 or $100,000 hospital bill. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Half of our people should not be forced to live paycheck to paycheck.
By the way, it doesn't even have to be a $50,000 hospital bill. My wife was having stomach issues, and she goes to the doctor. The doctor says we need to have a lab test. Now, the moment that the doctor says they need to have a lab test, you're being dinged for the initial hospital visit. You're going to be dinged for the lab test, and you're going to be dinged for the results of that lab test because the lab test is only telling you another area to go, which you may need another lab test, which is exactly what took place. Some of the lab tests were like $1,000. What is my wife's reaction to this? Yeah, I don't need to go back. Is there something wrong? this is expensive, I don't need to go back. Again, he's not wrong. Even if it's not $50,000, it doesn't have to be $50,000 to be a deterrent to going back to figure out what's wrong. And oftentimes that hides worse issues.
And you know why they're worried about their kids? Because they should be worried about their kids. Because for the first time in the modern history of this country, our younger generation, if we do not turn it around, will likely have a lower standard of living than their parents. Meanwhile, while the middle class struggles, while we got 40 million people living in poverty, the top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 92%. The wealthiest 3 families in America own more wealth than the bottom half of the American people. Got that? This is more wealth inequality than at any time since the 1920s. And today in America, while people are working 2 or 3 jobs to pay the bills, 49% of all new income goes to the top 1%. And the reason that the rich get much richer is that they don't put their money under the mattress. They invest it in politics, which is why, by the way, if elected president, I will do everything I can to overturn that disastrous Supreme Court decision on Citizens United.
Understand what that means. This is not said in a vacuum. If Bernie Sanders is saying that the money that these guys are getting from these companies that they've been able to save from, dropping shipping jobs overseas, essentially the wealth being expropriated to the top, being dumped into politics because politics gives the best of investments, essentially the money back to him. That also does mean that the people who he's running with and he's going to need to enact the policies that he wants are these exact same people that are getting their pockets greased.
Is a human right,
but he
not
is right.
a privilege.
Let's let him keep going.
The United States, as many of you may know, is the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right. And the result of that in our dysfunctional health care system is that today 34 million Americans have no health insurance, and far more than that are underinsured with high copayments and high deductibles, which means that even if you have insurance, you still don't go to the doctor when you should because you can't afford the deductible or the copayment. Meanwhile, and it's important that we all understand this as we debate health care, the United States spends twice as much per person on health care as do the people of any other country. So let me say it again. 34 million uninsured, even more underinsured. We pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. And at the end of all that, we end up spending as a nation twice as much per person on health care as any other major country, all of whom guarantee health care to all people. And that is why 4 years ago, I began the discussion. And as president, I intend to end the discussion to finally bring a Medicare for all single-payer program to the United States of America. And I want to say one last word on Medicare. Medicare is a very strong program. Medicare is a popular program, but Medicare is not a perfect program and has to be improved. Right now, Medicare for seniors, people 65 or older, does not cover dental care. Am I right? It does not cover hearing aids. Am I right? Does not cover eyeglasses. The Medicare for All proposal that we have introduced will cover dental care, eyeglasses, and hearing aids. So let me just conclude by saying this. We are living in an unprecedented moment in American history, and that's just the simple truth. We have a president who is a pathological liar, a president who is trying to move us into an authoritarian form of society, who either does not understand the Constitution of the United States or has disdain for the Constitution, a president who is trying to divide us up in a very un-American way. So our job is to bring our people together. Our job is to fight for economic, social, racial, and environmental justice, and that is what my campaign is about. We have now over 1 million volunteers in every state and every congressional district in this country who are prepared to stand up to defeat Trump and to create the kind of...
Hitting Trump is going to be obligatory, of course, because that's who ultimately they're running against.
Thank you all very much.
Bernie Sanders is going to use whatever is available to him to hit Donald Trump. Him, pathological liar, yes. Authoritarian-ish, doesn't care about the Constitution. You could say that about the last couple of presidents. So, but he's doing what you expect him to do as a candidate. But a lot of this, 90-something% of this, was just policy. If he had a chalkboard, he would have just used the chalkboard. He's going to take questions from the audience. So this is the part that I always find the most interesting because it's unexpected. Let's hear him.
You got a microphone? Wait, you got a mic there.
Senator, I had a question on your proposal for Medicare and for Social Security.
Good.
Might either of those programs require means testing?
No, not in my view. I mean, I understand the question, but I'll tell you what, the strength of those, we can say, okay, in Social Security, you know, if you're above $100,000 a year, we're going to cut your benefits and all that, Medicare the same. Once you begin down that path, today it could be 100,000, 2 years later it's 80,000, it's 60,000, and then it becomes a welfare program for the poor. I believe that healthcare and Social Security must be universal programs, that every single person gets the benefits that they deserve. Now, the other side of the equation is we are going to demand that the wealthy and large profitable corporations start paying their fair share of taxes. All right? So you may say, well, why does Warren Buffett need Social Security? He's doing well with his tens of billions of dollars. And my answer is Warren will get his Social Security, but he's going to pay a hell of a lot of taxes based on his income and his wealth. Okay, ma'am, right here, orange shirt, yeah.
Essentially, keep it simple.
Yeah, I don't think it's, you know, last time I was here, it was a little bit simpler. There were two people. Secretary Clinton and myself.
Yeah, you got shafted.
You know, we started out in that campaign way behind. We ended up losing by 5 points. I had hoped we could win, but we didn't. And by the way, this time we hope and expect to win. But look, I know, I don't know all of them, but many of them are senators who I see every day. And they're good people. I know them all. And my hope is that this campaign will be run on an issue-oriented basis where we'll have serious discussions about the issues facing this country. And my hope and expectation, it will not be some campaign where people are trying to salvage and destroy the character of other people. I think the American people are sick and tired of that. And you're not going to hear me disparage, you know, people who are friends of mine.
I'd argue they can't do that. They don't have a choice. They can't run that campaign. I mean, if they're running that campaign, they've gotten desperate. Meaning, not just Sanders, meaning if any of the candidates run that campaign, they're in a scorched earth mode and they're desperate. Because again, anything that's used against them as opposition research in primaries is going to be used by Donald Trump for its value. Hypocrisy is not going to be one of those things that Donald Trump cares about. He will hit them with it.
Whatever isn't, that's probably not going to happen. You know, everybody will have lower votes.
It's that same big chocolate discount
is going to get, you know, you know, everybody will have lower votes. Yes, ma'am. Here's a mic.
First of all, I support you because of your stand on health insurance. Presently, I pay $1,306 a month for my health insurance. In the town, I was a high school teacher for almost 40 years, and we didn't pay into Social Security. So I pay $1,306 a month, and the town where I worked in Massachusetts has to pay $1,306. So, sir, for me to live here, my health insurance company gets $2,612 a month for my health insurance. And I'm
Let me just interrupt you. $2,600 a month. Somewhere
sir.
around-
Yes, sir.
That's $30,000 a year for health insurance. Does anybody think that that is vaguely sane? All right. And this is what's going on all over the country. You know, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
No,
if
no,
you
no.
are today a family of 4, independently employed, you know how much you're paying for health insurance? Paying $28,000 a year for health care costs. And this is unsustainable. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Not
Yeah.
at all, sir. And I'm willing to pay more, certainly not more than that, but I'm willing to pay because I didn't pay into Medicare, but I think $1,306, sir, is a little exorbitant. Secondly, I really support your education plan as I taught high school history for 40 years. But, sir, the only thing I would suggest is have tests. In other words, not everybody, is going to be, A+ in college. So perhaps if you had tests, as they do in some European countries where I taught for a time, everybody takes a test, and if you pass the test, you can go on as far in school as you can free. And along the way, they have, as you suggested, sir, technical schools so that people, there's no disgrace, certainly, sir, in being a plumber or electrician. And then one final thing. I'll shut up.
Well, let me just say this. The point that I do agree with you on is not everybody has the ability or the academic, ability or the desire to go on to college. But God knows that in this country we need plumbers and we need sheet metal workers and we need carpenters, all of which can make a good living. And we have to make sure that those young people get that training as well. All right, let me ask another question. Let's get to somebody else.
I just one final thing, sir. Please stress, because I'm doing this for another gentleman, please stress that socialism is not communism.
Okay.
That's very, very important that you stress that.
Thank you. Thank you. I will, as a matter of fact. Okay, I see a hand way, way in the back. Yes, ma'am. Yep. Stand up. Mike is coming. Okay, thank you.
Welcome, Bernie.
Thank
Glad
you.
to have you here. My question, and it's not to be negative at all. We've had other candidates here, and one thing people have been asking, and I want to ask you, is if you don't get the nomination, will you support whatever Democrat gets the nomination?
Well, the answer is absolutely and positively yes. I've been very public about that. And I want to make one thing very clear, because sometimes, you see on... Oh, really? I didn't know that. I thought I ran all over the country into Nevada and everybody else working as hard as I humanly could to see that Hillary Clinton was elected president of the United States. All right, and one of the things I take a little bit of umbrage at, okay, is just that, all right? Hillary Clinton and I ran in a tough campaign. She won, I lost.
My question is a little different, and nobody ever asked the question that I would ask. If you were cheated, if you run in a contest and you believe that contest was unfair, and the people who support you believe that contest is unfair, do you still continuously turn around and support the candidate who you believe just cheated you? You knew you were cheated in that last election. Do you turn around and support that person? That's the question. The question is not so much, will you support the new candidate? The question is, will you support that candidate without reservation, regardless of what takes place? That's what I want to know. That's what no one ever asks.
If I don't win, I will support the winner. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Speaking of issues that separate and divide or that need attention, common sense gun legislation
Yep.
needs attention.
Yes.
We need safety for all as much as we need Medicare for all. You have a platform that does address some of the issues. Would you add to that platform support for safe storage or responsible storage for firearms, and also for extreme risk orders? In other words, risk, like red flag laws. That's not on your platform. That's the protection when somebody is in a crisis and removing access to guns from that person.
Something we will, the first one, yes, and the second one we'll certainly take a look at. Look, I'll tell you a story which will not shock you. All over the country, you know, when I go all over the country and I talk to younger people, there was a kid I talked to, I can't remember where he was, in South Carolina, I think. Big kid, like 6'2" or something. And he said, you know, I got to tell you, I and many of my friends are scared to go to school. And I hadn't realized, you know, when we grew up, school was a safe harbor, wasn't it? It's a place you socialize, you learn, you know. But that all over this country, think how horrible it is that kids are now scared, and every day in some state, in some city, there's a drill, right? And, you know, this is awful. And I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and tell you that I or anybody else that I know of has a magical solution. We got hundreds of millions of guns in this country today, including a lot of assault weapons, and you have a number of emotionally disturbed people, all right? That's not a good combination. So I think we got to do a couple of things. I think we have to be as aggressive as we can to make sure that guns do not fall into the hands of people who should not have that. And that means a significant extension of background checks, means we have to do away with the gun show loophole, which you are familiar with. It means to say we have to do away with the existing provision where you could walk into a gun show today and do the background check. You can buy 10 guns and you can sell it out to some gang member out there. We got to do away with that. And I'll tell you something else, not widely known. Way back when, 1988, I ran for the United States Congress in a three-way race in Vermont, ran for Congress. I was the only candidate at that point, a few years ago, to say that assault weapons are military weapons and should not be in the hands of civilians in this country. That was back in '88. I lost that election in a state which had no gun control at all right? I don't have to tell anybody in Las Vegas, God knows, you have suffered the worst mass killing in this country's history, I believe. So I don't have to tell you what a military-style assault weapon can do. Okay, so no magical answers, but we have to do everything that we can to address that and to make sure that the day comes sooner than later when children go to school and don't have to worry about being shot. Okay. Yes, sir, right there. Yes. The question is, can I talk about foreign affairs and do I have a solution to the Middle East crisis? God, if I had a solution to the Middle East crisis, I'd be the smartest guy in the world, and I don't. All right, well, let me thank you for asking that. So let's talk about foreign affairs, military affairs. I don't know, lately, I have been attacked by a number of media sources for my views on foreign affairs and military affairs. See? So let me be very honest with you. When I was a young man, long before I ever dreamed that I would be elected anything, okay, I, along with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and millions of others, marched and opposed the war in Vietnam. All right, and for those of you who are of my generation, you know what that war did to our generation. It destroyed, virtually destroyed our generation. 59,000 brave young men were killed in that war. Many came home addicted to drugs. You have Vietnam vets sleeping out on the streets in America today. Many who came home took their own lives. So I'm not going to apologize to anybody for having opposed that war. When I was in the House of Representatives, and the issue
Having
of
opposed that war
invading
was
Iraq
right.
came up during the
Rich
Bush
Nixon, if you
administration.
remember, gets elected
Go to
saying he has a
YouTube
secret
and
plan
hear
in
what
order to
I
win the
said.
war. That secret plan
And
was
what I
essentially
said, in
more
essence, I
bombing,
do
some of
not
which was
believe
illegal in
Dick
Cambodia.
Cheney
We
or
committed
John
war
Bolton or the
crimes
Bush administration
in those
when they
countries.
told us that Saddam Hussein, a terrible
Sanders was
dictator,
right to oppose
had
that war.
weapons
This
of
wasn't
mass
something
destruction.
we had to
And I
do.
did
The United
everything
States
that
wasn't
I
doing
could.
this
I
because
really
they had to
did.
do it. The
Tried
United
as hard
States
as I
was
could
doing it for
to
geopolitical
prevent the
reasons.
United States from getting involved in that
Millions
war.
of
And all of you
Vietnamese
know the horrific impact of
with
that war.
59,000 Americans.
So I don't make any apologies for that. A couple of months ago, I worked with conservative Republicans in order to get the United States out of the unauthorized,
By the way, Joe Biden was
unconstitutional,
for the war
and
in Iraq.
horrific war in Yemen.
Just saying.
You know what's going on in Yemen? Yemen is a poor country, but as a result of the Saudi-led intervention in the civil war there, the United Nations estimates that some 200,000 men, women, and children, civilians, will be dead by the end of the year, and tens of thousands of children have already starved to death. And there is a real danger that that will turn into a mass famine. Worst humanitarian crisis in the United States caused by the dictator of Saudi Arabia who got intervened. We should not be in that war. I'm going to do everything I can to get us out of that war. And lastly, some of you have been reading that this guy, John Bolton. Everybody know who John Bolton is? All right. John Bolton was one of the leading architects of the war in Iraq in the Bush
The
administration.
dirty secret is that Obama greenlit that war with the Saudis, meaning he understood what was going to take place. He knew it was going to be a catastrophe, but he wanted to get the Iran nuclear deal done, and he didn't want the Saudis complaining about it, so he gave it a green light. That's in the New York
That
Times.
maybe we should go
Just-
to war with Iran.
He would never say
I
that. He
think
can't
is
say
about
that
the
because
dumbest
he has to do a
idea that I've
primary.
ever heard in my life. All right? And I will do everything I can as a United States Senator to prevent that. If we go to war in Iran, I think you are looking at an Orwellian nightmare of perpetual, never-ending warfare. All right, last point that I want to make is we have a president who, I mean, it's hard to believe, given our history, our belief
We are
in
already in
democracy
perpetual,
and
never-ending
justice.
warfare.
We have a president who continually has conflicts with our allies around the world, whether it's Canada, Germany, UK, and yet cozies on up to the worst dictators in the world. All right? I want to do everything we can to prevent a war with North Korea, absolutely. And I don't fault Trump, by the way, for sitting down with Kim Jong-un. But you don't praise somebody who is running one of the worst dictatorships in the world. You can negotiate, don't praise. You don't praise Vladimir Putin. You don't bring the guy from Hungary here who is an anti-Semite. All right? So what we have got to do is have a foreign policy which stresses democracy and human rights, which says that we have to do everything we can to bring countries together, strengthen the UN, and do everything we can to prevent war and solve international conflict through diplomacy. Last point I'd make on that. Last point I'd make on that. Now, this may be wishful thinking, but this is what I would do as president. Right now, in the United States and around the world combined, the world is spending about $1.5 trillion on weapons of destruction, right? Tanks and guns and planes to kill each other. Meanwhile, you got climate change out there, which is one of the great threats that this planet has ever faced. My hope is, as president, that I would lead this world to maybe, instead of putting money into weapons of destruction, let us come together to fight climate change rather than kill each other.
See, the catch and the problem that you have with climate change, or even for the standpoint of the military-industrial
ma'am.
complex,
Yes,
is we're
ma'am.
spending over $1 trillion on weapons.
Wait for a mic.
That money is going somewhere. It's not going into the ether, meaning those are jobs.
How do you feel about
if you cut the
starting
military
the
budget,
impeachment
you are in
proceedings
effect
based on
cutting
yesterday's
jobs.
testimony?
How do you replace
As a
those
Democrat,
jobs? You
it's
need to
very
find some way to
frustrating.
replace those. Climate
We're just
is
got to
not.
wait until you or one of your
It sounds
colleagues
like
wins in
Sanders'
2020.
Yeah,
Thank you.
good question. All right, here is Nancy Pelosi does not have an easy job, okay, and that is one of the reasons she does not. Here are the dynamics there. I believe you got two conflicting tendencies there, and I think they can be resolved. Number one, this president is not above the law. No president is above the law. This president must be held accountable, and I believe that the Judiciary Committee should begin impeachment inquiries. All right? Now, that's not impeachment. That is to determine.
He is being pushed on this issue. This is not an issue he wants to have a conversation on. I guarantee you this is not his issue. Part of the reason Elizabeth Warren was pushing this issue so hard, the AOC was pushing this issue. AOC was pushing this issue. Elizabeth Warren jumped on, and some of the other candidates. This is not his issue. This is not the thing that he wants to spend his time talking about. He wants to hit Trump on his notion of economics and the things that Trump promised and lied about, and the way that Trump has betrayed the people who voted for him. Not impeachment. Impeachment is divisive. That's why he's hedging on this, talking about the Judicial Committee. This is not an area he wants to go.
And right now, there are 47 Democrats, and not all of them today would impeach Trump. So they go through the scenario where you go through month after month of impeachment debate. Let's just say, and I'm not sure that how it would turn out, if a majority would, but let's assume they do, comes to the Senate. And go through another period of time, and the Senate does not impeach Trump, which is likely. And the American people in the middle of all of that.
This mealy-mouthed person here that was so open-mouthed and the other stuff that he was talking about, this economic argument.
What are you doing to the
He's mealy-mouthed again. This is not necessarily the conversation he wants to have.
Change? Why aren't you raising the minimum wage? Why are you just worried about Trump all of the time? You understand my point?
Yeah. He's right. He's saying it.
Or any other
He's being
American
honest.
president to be above the law, and we've got to pursue that. But if the challenge will be to walk down two paths simultaneously, not so easy, okay? We cannot make ordinary Americans think that we have forgotten longer hours for lower wages, that they can't afford health care, that their kids can't go to college, that climate change is not a huge issue. You follow what I'm saying? So that is the difficult challenge that we face.
He's right. And he's being honest about that. That's a line. And I got to be honest, I don't know where the politics go. I tend to trend more towards this as being somewhat of a divisive issue, and you lose a section of the population if you're pushing this notion of impeachment. This is great for Democrats, but the rest of the population may think this is a witch hunt, and they may punish you for this. So yes, I love the fact that he said that. Let's keep going.
In your campaign, you did last time. I'm sure there'll be way more this time. What I want to know is, how are we going to get all this wonderful legislation passed that probably everyone in the world wants to see us pass? Is there a strategy for overcoming, I hope I'll follow your lead here, for overcoming...
Hold the mic a little further away from you.
For overcoming the media circus that we are going to see again. I'm sure, I hope, your contingency has a strategy for addressing that, because all of the wonderful, you're a serious candidate and he's a buffoon. So he is going to do as he has always done and overwhelm everyone with things that actually everybody wants to hear what he has to say, because they just do, whether they're Republicans or Democrats. What are you going to do? What's your strategy? What will you,
Good.
please,
Hey,
please.
thank you for that excellent question. All right, that's a very good question. Look, let's not kid ourselves. How do I say this with 5 television cameras looking at me? You know, Trump may be crazy, but he is not a fool, is what you're saying. All right? He was a very successful reality TV guy, and he knows how to mitigate. No, it's true. That's true. And there is a reason why he spends half his day watching television. You would think a president had 1 or 2 other things to do, but that's what he does. You're absolutely right. This is what he pays attention to. And every tweet that he sends out, I don't know, was some outrageous tweet today. I don't know. I can't keep up with him. Okay? And that's what media focuses on. And that is a very legitimate and real question. And I'll tell you what I think. First of all, let me tell you that one of the reasons, this is very early in the campaign, but Every serious poll that has been out there has me defeating Trump, in some cases by pretty good numbers. All right, so we should not be pessimistic about whether he'll be a tough candidate. All right, but I think he can be beaten. We did some polling a month or so ago in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, states he won. We were pretty far ahead of him in those states. I think we beat him for two reasons. Number one, we are in the process of putting together the strongest grassroots campaign that I think anyone has ever seen. We have over, as I mentioned earlier, 1 million volunteers right now. They're going to be knocking on doors all over this country. Number two, young people.
My wife has gotten involved in Organize with Sanders. She's going to be giving a report on what it's like to be a part of the beginning of a grassroots organization. So that should be an interesting report. I got to be honest, that's actually a pretty strong political strategy also that goes beyond just knocking on doors in the political campaigns. After the political campaigns is where these guys become weapons.
2018, they went up. We got to make sure that they go up even higher, and we're going to do everything we can. These are young people who are anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-homophobia, very concerned about climate change and education, everything else. We're going to work hard on that. The third thing is that we are going to go all over the country, and I was in the Midwest already, exposing Trump for the liar that he was. Look, if you were a worker in Michigan and your job was shipped to China or someplace, you wanted to hear what Trump had to say. If you couldn't afford health care, if you couldn't afford to send your kids to college, what he said made sense. Problem is he lied, and we will expose him for the liar that he is. So add all of that together, and we also, by the way, have our own social media, which I urge all of you to pay attention to. We're not just dependent on the national media. So you raise the right issue, and we're very conscious of that. And we're doing everything we can to run a strong grassroots campaign, which will defeat him. Yes, ma'am. Oh, okay. I didn't take it as an insult. Okay.
Anyway, you just started to talk about the Middle East and didn't mention Israel. And that's very important to me,
yes,
along with the anti-Semitism in this country, which I know has been going on way before Trump, but it's rampant even in our own Congress. So I'd love to hear about
It's not rampant in their own Congress. No, I don't accept
well,
that.
It's rampant in the world. And
it is rampant, and it's growing
in our Congress. So I would like to hear what you have to say about that, please.
Well, as somebody who is Jewish, obviously it is an issue of concern to me. All right? But it is not just anti-Semitism, it is racism.
Shout out to him knocking that down right off the bat, almost viscerally. It's not rampant in our Congress. Shout out to Sanders on that. Because that's not a back and forth where, he understands where she's going with that. And this is somewhat of an attack on Ilhan and Tlaib.
Kind of lifted that down. That's okay.
For that.
You want to march in Charlottesville as a neo-Nazi? You're a pretty good guy. It's okay. We like people on both sides. And when you do that, you unleash the kind of the lowest, the worst instincts of people. Middle East is a very difficult issue, all right? But let me just say this, and you may disagree with me again, but you may. And then this is what I believe. I believe it is a very, needless to say, a very volatile area. I think the United States, for the sake of Israel, and I 100% support and defend Israel's right to exist in peace and security. But if that is going to happen, you need a even-handed policy toward the Middle East. It cannot just be pro-Israel. You got to recognize the reality of what life is in Gaza. You know what life is like in Gaza now? You got youth unemployment of 60 or 70%. People can't leave the area. Do you think that that is going to lead to sustained peace? I don't think so. It's not. We are the wealthiest country. Now, I know that is, I get criticized for saying that a lot. All that I'm saying is I am pro-Israel.
That's an amazing thing that he gets criticized for that.
People together.
It's Hey, if you put people in horrible situations, those people are going to really dislike you for putting them in those horrible situations.
What is a very difficult issue.
Oh God, I can't believe you just said that. Yeah, that's true. If you're thinning out the population with these bombings, you have an open air ghetto and you're shocked that the people in that open air ghetto are going to be angry at you for being in that open air ghetto.
No easy solution.
I mean, come on.
Okay, maybe one last
Come
question.
on.
Gentleman right here.
I'm always shocked that people are shocked that people will be upset to live in those situations.
Why can't we do as they do in Japan and in Europe and reprocess and recycle nuclear waste on the site? We don't want weapons-grade plutonium shipped to the test site on public highways and nuclear waste going through the highways in secret without any coordination with local first responders. If there's an accident, there's no antidote on the truck. The truckers are certified by DOT to do all sorts of things, but not to give first aid. The casks themselves, the plutonium casks, are only certified to withstand a 30-foot drop. And when you're assessing risks, you have to consider the worst case scenario,
Sure.
not hypothetical or typical accidents.
Okay, let me just say, I agree with you. B, my old friend Harry Reid made it very clear to me that he thought, and I agree, that Yucca Mountain is not a safe repository for high-level nuclear waste. I agree with that. I do not believe that, people disagree with me, maybe here. I believe that the future of energy in this country is a massive investment in wind and solar. And by the way, this state should be leading the country in solar. And you're not?
Joe Manchin gave a conversation one time where he was talking about this notion of solar power and saying that, these other energy sources are not, he used a different term, but he meant primary, essentially. This notion that you can carry it around, solar, and when there are intervening periods where these things aren't necessarily active and so they're not necessarily completely reliable as an energy source. Battery power shoots that out the window. The moment that you have a situation where you can have a battery that can absorb that energy, then at that point, well, whether it's oil or whether it's a battery that's containing a chemical that produces energy in this way, well, that becomes, this notion of a compatible system of sorts. Houses that have battery packs can last through the course of the day of using the solar power and storing that solar power in order to use for nighttime and repeating the process. It's a game changer. That's my point.
We can prevent Trump and his allies from dividing us
I'm
up.
intervening.
We can stand together and support the winner of the Democratic primary, which I am pledged to do. I hope it's me, but if it's not, I will do that. And let's go forward together, not only to defeat Trump, that's terribly important, but to create the kind of nation that we as the wealthiest nation on earth should be able to have. People should not have to pay $1,300 a month for health care. Kids should not be able to go to college. We should be aggressively addressing climate change. So we got a lot of work in front of us. Let's go forward together. Thank you very much.
Morning, Mr. Bernie Sanders. I have questions that never get asked. Well, the UFO question, I think that question is awesome. Essentially, the Navy has started recording UFOs and has started taking down detailed description of those planes in a more organized fashion. The fact that they're doing this indicates that there's something there, even though we don't necessarily know what that something is, but the pilots are recounting something that seems to be under intelligent control. If you, when Mr. Bernie Sanders gets elected, would you open the books, open the files, and would you prod and try to get this information released to the public? That's the first question. The people who are working on your campaign, where you have these lists that you're creating, the volunteers, if you don't make it through the primaries, and if you lose the primaries, will you give that list over to the person who wins the primary? Unequivocally. without qualification. Meaning whether you win, lose, cheated, or somewhere in between, those lists of people who you've been able to accrue gets handed over. Do you do that? Yeah, I have questions. I would have questions. And two things. Oh, I know what this is. Impeachment. I had a conversation with my mom the other day, and she doesn't like Trump. That's to put it mildly. Puts it extremely mildly. But in this conversation, I was trying to make the point to her that think about all the things in your life that you value and that are difficult and that could be made easier if you didn't necessarily have to deal with the bills associated with it, if you didn't have to deal with the difficulty and the stress associated, if you made more money over the time you were going, your work history, if your brother who has to deal, who has to help with a mom, if he didn't have to work the two jobs because he could afford it on one. Think of all the things that would make your life easier. Expansion of Social Security, expansion of Medicare benefits. Does it really involve impeachment? To which she had to honestly say, no, it doesn't. As much as I dislike Trump, it doesn't involve impeachment, meaning this is not something pertinent to my life. This is also to some degree divisive, meaning you have a section of the population that is going to see this for what it is, as a witch hunt. So not only does it not positively affect your life, meaning this is just political theater at this point, that regardless of how this outcomes, it's not going to have any tangible effect on your life. And on top of that, it's politically divisive. Now, Sanders wants to have this conversation about Medicare for all, expansion of Social Security, climate change. He wants to have a policy-driven debate because he understands that from a standpoint of a policy-driven debate, he can make this argument and pursue this argument that Donald Trump has lied to you and utterly betrayed you. Elizabeth Warren doesn't want to have that conversation. So Elizabeth Warren wants to scream impeachment. This is somewhat the nuclear bomb option. If you can drag the conversation to this notion of impeachment, then you can kind of pull away this notion of the language and the conversation that Sanders wants to have. This is a fight that is taking place in the political space that is not directly related to the topic per se, but almost like a meta topic that they're fighting over. I don't know. I got to be honest. I don't have a clear answer on the positive, whether this is positive or negative. If your goal is to get elected, and you are running just as any random Democrat, why don't I have a picture for this? All right. Let's go with this. And you're running as just some random Democrat. If the President of the United States was under impeachment, meaning there was a big political fight over this notion of impeachment while Donald Trump is running for President of the United States, meaning he's doing two things at once. He's fighting impeachment while simultaneously running. Does it help any odd Democratic candidate, any random candidate, to be able to attack Trump as being corrupt and point to the issues that are coming up in terms of the impeachment hearing? I don't know if that's positive or negative, to be honest. What I suspect is what Donald Trump would do would be running around the country, scream at the height of his lungs that this is a witch hunt. This is a witch hunt. There was nothing to see here. Mueller cleared me of this, and they're trying to hit me on an ancillary charge. This is a witch hunt. It's what I said it was from the beginning. They're out to get me. They can't beat me politically, so they're going after me with this witch hunt. He's going to run against the fact that they're doing a witch hunt. I don't know if that's positive or negative politically, and I don't know how that necessarily plays out. I would say this: it doesn't seem like Sanders wants to have this conversation. He wants to have the conversation on a debate of ideas. We'll see how it plays out. But Sanders Town Hall, like I said, there'd be certain different questions that I would ask. Questions more so on foreign policy. Would you pull us out of Afghanistan? Would you pull us out of Syria? This notion of North Korea. Would you sign us back to the Iran deal? Like, these regime change wars, yeah, there will be several questions that I will want to get further into than the people in the audience. But interesting town hall. Interesting town hall. All right, let's see who's here. But he chose to bomb Kosovo. Is skipping that. Fair enough, Manny. Fair enough. Balthazar, solar panels are now being made that can translate the impact of raindrops into electricity. Piezoelectric meters. Yes. We also have geothermal, wind, tidal, and other sources. Yeah. I guess the point, Balthazar, is the energy sources are there. And not just the energy sources are there. The moment that you get battery energy in part of this, meaning the moment that you connect the battery to the absorption of the energy, you have a reusable source of energy. You have a source of energy that lasts. And that technology is only going to get better. It's only going to get better. I mean, imagine a situation where you don't have to pay an energy bill, where the government subsidizes energy panels that go on your houses that has a battery pack hooked up to it, meaning every house that's created at this point supplies its own energy. Yes, it may be hooked to the grid, but ultimately it supplies its own energy, and some of the energy feeds back into the grid. All of these houses are little batteries and meters in and of themselves. There's nothing stopping us from doing that. It's just political will. It's just political will. What is the world that you want? The governmental apparatus is a pliable tool that you can use in any which way you want. It just needs to have the political will to do so. There's nothing stopping you. All right. This video has gone for a while. Question. I'd ask, do you admit that we all die from climate change if Joe Biden or Trump wins? Yes. Are you willing to be the only hope of actually changing our energy infrastructure so that human race doesn't perish? Look, if Joe Biden's position on this seems ludicrous to me, how could it not be ludicrous? The scientists say you have 12 years left. Not 12 years left and then get your house in order. You have 12 years left. And even that's somewhat of a sketchy prospect because ultimately, they don't have a word of God on this. They just have this kind of evidence that they're looking at and making predictions based on the evidence that they're looking at. And they're admitting this looks bad. Even going from the standpoint of the extinction that seems to be taking place from the biodiversity standpoint. We are not being good stewards of this planet. Clearly. This notion that you're going to slow walk any kind of improvement that you're making. Do you believe in the scientists or not? And I don't mean this in this kind of believing like the word of God, but more so believing in the way the evidence or the trending of the evidence. If the Democratic Party screams that we're the party that believes in science, then you can't have it both ways. Are you the party that believes in science or not? And if the scientists are telling you, look, you have 12 years to get your house in order. This is not something that we can pussyfoot around about. This is existence. This is our existence. And in the face of that, you say, well, I believe in a middle of a road approach. That seems like a lunacy to me. At which point is the radical proposition, the proposition of not doing anything in the face of a catastrophe? Yeah, I agree with you. Sanders lied. Sanders just lied. More than 80% of the senators aren't good people. No one can honestly say that Rafael Cruz is either good or a person. Good or a person. Clearly, he can't, come on. Like, he can't tear down the people that he's going to need to push through the policy, especially when he's vulnerable trying to run through the primary. So, fair enough. Fair enough. All right. I'm going to end this. Interesting. I mean, I hope Nina's a talented enough creator to overcome any skeletons. I like Nina. Yeah. I like Nina. Garnome. JT, all kinds of radical shit is possible. We have the ability to radically reshape our systems. We do. Like, the oddest part to me, or the oddest engagements, are when people say, well, government is not supposed to do that. It's like, why not? Government is a tool. Government is whatever you want government to be. It's a tool, What are the needs of your society? And government is supposed to be the tool, the edifice that allows you to accomplish those needs. It's not this thing that never changes and is what it is, for all time. It's nonsense. Go to the Real Engineering channel and watch California's renewable energy problem. Uh-oh. It's, but Bob, it's not that, I don't think there are difficulties. It's not that. It's that I think not doing something is tantamount to essentially oblivion. It's, you don't have a choice. I guess that's my point. Regardless of what the problems are, you have to overcome the problems, because not overcoming those problems is to some degree tantamount to oblivion. That's all. It's like you push yourself in a direction. You may not necessarily have the answers all the way, but you at the very least have to engage it. At the very least have to engage it. Bob says, give up due to capitalism. Right. 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 All right. I'll end this. Guys, if you enjoyed this content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks all.